Good week, everyone, and welcome inside the Red Mile Rundown. No cold open this morning because, well, we got some good topics today, and I really didn't know how to put them all into one summary. So, Robert and I will just dive into the topics today because we have a great episode lined up for all of you. Appreciate you all for joining us this week on the Red Mile Rundown. Robert, welcome inside as well. How are you today?
Things are going pretty good. How about yourself?
Yeah, not bad, not bad. The new year's upon us. We've had all the holidays back at it. Kids are back at school. We're back in the process of getting regular work back underway. So it's good. It's really, really good. How'd you enjoy this last week of Flames action here before we dive into the first topic here? Some interesting games. What'd you make of the Flames last week, and how excited are you to dive into breaking all that down this week?
Yeah, I mean it was an up and down week. I mean the win against Vancouver was fun with all the fights, and it was an intense game. It was an emotional win, so you definitely like to see that. But then, man, the last two games those were tough to watch. I mean they had a 3-2 lead against Utah. Blew it in the third period. That third period was probably one of their worst of the entire season. So that was really disappointing. And then the game on Saturday against Nashville. I mean they threw a lot of pucks at Annunen. But nothing really came of it. I mean, there were not a lot of high danger chances. The offense wasn't all that inspiring. I mean, they worked hard, but in the end, they lose 4-1. So honestly, pretty disappointing last couple games here for the Flames.
And that leads perfectly into topic one on the podcast today. They did throw a lot of pucks on Saturday towards the Nashville net. They threw a lot of pucks towards Utah's net for 40 minutes, and they weren't really all successful. So we want to talk on the show today about how do we get this offense going? What do you do with this Flames team to spark more than just throwing a bunch of pucks at the net? How do you get to create more high dangers and get to those situations that allows you to be more successful here? Robert, this was your topic that you were throwing into the show today, and I absolutely love it because there's a number of different ways to get this Flames offense going or attempt to get this offense going. So why don't you get the ball started for us here today, Robert? What are the ways that you're looking at to try to help this Flames offense going here?
Well, it's hard because with the roster that they currently have and the talent that's currently on the roster, it's going to be tough for them to find ways to score more than 3 goals on a lot of nights. I mean, that's just the reality of the situation. So I think it really comes down to 3 different options. So one is lineup changes, of course, and we've seen that a lot throughout the season so far. You could maybe do a couple call-ups from the American Hockey League, or there's Ryan Huska can maybe make some changes to his system to allow for a little bit more offense in their game. So I mean, I'll throw it to you. What would you do if you were the Calgary Flames to try and get some more offense going right now?
Yeah, see, I'm right there with you how tough this can be for the Flames. I think it's got to start obviously on the roster here. There's not a lot of depth. We all rave about how many wingers the Flames have, but there really isn't a lot of scoring depth to those wingers. After you have Sharangovich and Kuzmenko, who obviously are both struggling here, there's not a lot, and Coronado, sorry, there's not a lot of guys who just jump off the page as these scoring, offensively producing wingers. You got guys that are really good wingers, like a Blake Coleman, who can produce and fight hard. Pospisil's the same. Nice as Huberto coming around as a winger, but you don't have a lot of options, in my opinion, to just bring in a winger here to help boost this offense. It really comes down to these guys that are already currently on the team for me right now. You have 2 guys that I've already talked about listed off here, Sharangovich and Kuzmenko. You've got to find a way to get one, if not both of these guys going. If you just had 50% more production from both of these guys, you automatically are going to increase the amount of offense that you're producing as a team. So I think it starts with that, and how you get those guys going, that to me is the mystery that Ryan Huska needs to do. His style of play is really, really good for a lot of the players on this team, but he needs to find a way to adapt a little bit more offensive flow for these kind of guys to get going here. Whether that's putting them on with different line mates, line juggling. We've seen Sharangovich with a few different guys. It doesn't work. Kuzmenko, I just don't know what to do with that guy at this moment. I know a lot of people don't even want him to be on the roster anymore. And we can't understate that the loss of Anthony Mantha threw a bit of a wrench into that top 9 for the Flames as well. So you got to try to get these guys on your roster going a little bit more. And when you don't have a guy like Sharangovich going, Obviously, Connor Zori's not going to be going as much either, because being his winger. So figuring out a way to get Sharangovich, Kuzmenko going would be go a long way to getting this Flames offense going. I'm just not sure how you get there, because you look at the American Hockey League, and all due respect to those guys that are leading down there, the Karens, the Kalapkas, I don't know if they come up to the Flames and provide a big offensive spark. And then if that also fails, then you're looking at the trade market here. So for me, it starts with the Sharangovich, the Kuzmenkos, getting those guys going. Hope you get more out of a Connor Zary and a Marty Pospisil, Robert. I just don't know where else you look for this Flames team as of right now.
Yeah, man, it's tough. And I mean, you bring up a really good point there. Like after the game the other night on Saturday, like I just put it on Twitter. I was like, where would the Calgary Flames be this season if Yegor Sharangovich and Andrei Kuzmenko had just lived up to expectations, not exceed them,
Absolutely.
not blow, their career highs out of the water or anything like that. Just be like if Sharangovich could have 10 goals by now and Kuzmenko could have 10 goals by now, that's an additional 13 goals for this team.
Mm-hmm.
And we see how many tight checking games, how many low scoring 1-goal games this Calgary Flames team plays in. Those extra 13 goals could go a huge way for this Calgary Flames team. And like, I don't want to put all the blame of the season on them, but man, those two guys are killing this team offensively right now. And if those two were if they were going, like I said, if they're just playing at their like career average, the Calgary Flames would firmly be in a playoff spot right now. Like, there's no doubt in my mind. Those extra 13 goals get them probably in that first wild card spot, probably ahead of Dallas right now. I think that's how big and important these two players are to the team. And I don't know how you get them going. I guess really the only way you can is just by maybe putting them on some new lines. And when it comes to Kuzmenko, super interesting conversation. Like you said, there's a lot of people out there that are like, put this guy on waivers. Like, I don't want to see him anymore. And I've been kind of right in that camp there too. But just with like the dire scoring needs that this Calgary Flames team has right now, I think this team has to put him back in the top 9 and put him back on one of the power play units, because Walker Dewar, Kevin Rooney, like those types of guys, they're not going to do it. Jacob Pelche is not going to be a high-end scorer at the NHL level. When Kuzmenko's on his game, he can be that player. He can be that 20-goal, 50, 60-point guy. There's no doubt in my mind. But he hasn't been that this year. But what else do you have? What are your other options other than trying to give Kuzmenko another try or trying to put Sharangovich in a different spot in the lineup? I think those are going to be the two keys to unlocking this offense right now. And I think Huska needs to put together some new lines. So here's what I'm thinking for the lines.
All right.
And I'll throw this out to you, and I want to see what you think of this.
All right.
So first, it starts with moving Pospisil to the fourth line. I think Martin Pospisil's he's been a lot better when it comes to like his energy, his physicality, just his overall engagement in the game, which is great. And I think that's awesome. But when it comes to offense, he's not doing anything. And he's playing with the two guys that are going right now, and he's still not putting up any points. Like, I think Kevin Ball had more points than him in December. He's got 2 goals all year. He's just not doing anything. So I take him out of the top 6, and I go Huberdeau, Kadri, Sharangovich. Move Sharangovich away from Zary and Pelche. It's not working. So just try something different. And Huberdeau and Sharangovich had a little bit of chemistry last season. Maybe you can get them going. Then you keep Coleman, Backlund, Coronado together. They've been playing really well. And then how about maybe bringing up a guy like Stromgren, going like Stromgren, Zary, Kuzmenko, and then Lomberg, Pospisil, Pelche. That way you get Rooney and Dewar out of the lineup. Those two guys are a black hole offensively. They don't do anything. They both just kind of do cardio out there. You bring up Stromgren, and then you put Kuzmenko and Sharangovich in positions to succeed. That's kind of the way I'm seeing it right now. And be curious to hear your thoughts on that. I know it's a lot of information at once, but
yeah, no problem. Run through that top 9 again, just real quick for me, if you don't mind.
Huberdeau, Kadri, Sharangovich, Coleman, Backlund, Coronado, Stromgren, Zary, Kuzmenko.
That third line, that's absolutely intriguing. I do wonder what William Stromgren's game would be like at the NHL level. And everyone from now until both the guys retire are going to compare him to Stankoven in Dallas. But you got to look at this guy's a much different player than Stankoven was. This guy's got a bigger body. He's got a nice elite shot that he can produce with, and he has been in the AHL. He's been really, really good for the Wranglers, especially over the last I'd say 5-6 weeks for them. And I think he's really coming along in his development. I just wonder how that translates to the NHL. And putting him with Zary and Kuzmenko is very interesting. It's a responsible center, and it's a guy that can finish on the other end. I like that idea on paper. I'm just not sure how it translates with Stromgren. He's not the first guy I thought about when it comes to call-ups, but I don't hate it. I'll tell you that right now. I think that's a really good call by you. I do wonder about putting Kuzmenko with Kadri. We talked about the chemistry they had last year. I know it didn't look good at the beginning of this year, but I wonder if you just put Kuzmenko with those two guys, let him go, and put Sharon Govich with Coleman and Backlund. And I know everyone in the comments and people on social media will come at me saying, but Coronado's been so good there. Yes, for me, Coronado's been so good there that I think he has the confidence now to help other guys come along. And maybe he's a guy that can work well with Zary. I floated that on last week's podcast as well. I'm sticking with that idea. That's why I don't hate your lines, Robert. I like my idea as well of the Coronado Zary connection. And Sharon Govich, when you play with a Backlund and a Coleman, you're going to be forced into being engaged on that line. They're just going to pull you along whether you like it or not. And I wonder if that helps get Sharon Govich's mind more engaged in the actual gameplay, and help get his confidence up doing all the other little things, and that eventually will lead to him finding the score sheet again. And then the other part that I really like what you said as well is put those guys back on power plays. Put Kuzmenko on a power play. I know that's the unpopular opinion across the Flames fanship right now. People don't even want to see this guy anymore. Put him in the lineup. Put him with guys that can score. Put him back on the power play, and just feed this guy offensive zone starts and see if you can just get him to create something. So don't hate your lines at all, Robert. I also have some ideas there that I wanted to float out for you as well.
Yeah, I mean, there's no right or wrong answers when it comes to this stuff, but I think you and I would both agree that something has to change. Like, for me, Martin Pospisil is proving that I think he's going to be a better fourth line energy physical player than he is a top 9 forward. I'm thinking Jacob Pelletier is kind of looking like he's going to be in the same sort of category. He's probably going to be a bottom 6, probably more of a fourth line guy, because the offense just really isn't there for him at the NHL level. So, and then you have Kevin Rooney and Walker Dewar, who both, in my opinion, aren't really NHL players on good teams. So there's 4 guys in your lineup right now that just can't score. And then you add on top of that Sharon Govich, who's really, really been struggling. So really, you have 5 guys in your forward group right now that can't score goals. So something has to change. So that's why I'm floating out the idea of maybe you call somebody up. Whether that's Stromgren, whether that's Rory Cairns, that's up for people to decide. Over the holidays here, I've ended up going to a couple Wranglers games, and at those games, Stromgren really stands out.
He does.
He's a guy that, with his size, with his skating, and that shot, you can see okay, there's potentially an NHL player there one day. And then interesting with Cairns is I find he plays a very quiet, sort of more cerebral game where he puts himself in really good positions to score. I think a lot of his goals this season have come from around the net. And I think he's just been really smart in terms of his his positioning and where he scores his goals. But if you're expecting Rory Cairns to come up here and be a dynamic offensive player, that's just not really who he is. He's not a dynamic player really in the AHL level. So that's why I kind of lean towards Stromgren at this point in time. But like I said, man, just something's got to change. Throw Kuzmenko in there, make a call up, sit Rooney and Dewar, and really start to kind of maneuver these lines, because how many times have the Flames scored more than 3 goals this year? Is it 5?
I think so.
And 3 of them were in the first 3 games of the season.
Yeah.
It's terrible. Something has to change, and you're not going to be making a trade where you're sending out draft picks and prospects to bring in a scorer. That's just not going to happen. So you have to find internal answers. And it's a serious problem for this team. This is a team that wants to make the playoffs. They desperately want to make it. And if they continue to trot out Pospisil in the top 9, Rooney, Dewar, Sharon Govich in the same position every single night, Pelletier in the top 9, they're not going to score because they're not getting any help on D outside of Mackenzie Weegar. Rasmus Anderson's gone cold, and everybody else in that defensive group is not really an offensively inclined player. So you got to find internal answers. You got to start doing things differently. And hopefully we start to see that as early as tomorrow night in Anaheim.
It's like you're reading my notes, Robert, because I wanted to touch on the D here. We listed off a lot of forwards and mixing up forward lines and how to get this forward going, that forward going. How much more should we actually expect from the back end, in your opinion? Because you mentioned it, Mackenzie Weegar's producing a little bit here, but he can produce a little bit more. We need Rasmus Andersson to start producing again if you want points from the back end. How much more should we expect from these guys? Jake Bean has scored in the past. Can he produce a little bit more? But for you, should we expect more from this back end, or is this back end even capable of providing us with more?
I think you could expect some more goals out of Mackenzie Weegar. I think overall he's been fine offensively, but I mean, the guy scored 20 last year. I know it's a career year, and he's kind of running on a high shooting percentage, but I think you expect to see a few more goals from Weegar. You definitely want to see more offense out of Andersson. I mean, he's really, really struggled, outside of like the first 7-8 games of the season. I wrote an article about it, and I think he at least like a week ago he had something like 7 points his last 29 games, which is around like a 20-point pace. That's just not good enough for Rasmus Andersson. You need that guy to be in that kind of 40-50 point range. So you can definitely expect some more out of him, but from guys like Ball and Hanley, Pahal, Bean, I don't think you can really expect a whole heck of a lot more, can you?
I don't. That's my worry, and that's why I asked the questions. I don't think there's anything more from that back end other than Rasmus Andersson picking back up his pace that he had early in this season here. Would a call up from the American Hockey League fix that situation? But you look at the American Hockey League, you're like, you got guys growing down there, learning the game down there, and the guys that are ready, like a Solovyov, he's not going to come up here and produce a whole bunch of defensive offense either. So the answer on the back end, I don't think is going to give you anything more than what you're already getting.
Well, can I just add in something there?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so like I said, I've been to a couple of Wranglers games here, and in the games I've gone to, their best defenseman each time has been Jeremy Poirier. And if there's a guy that you want to bring up to the NHL to try and kickstart a little bit of offense, he would be the guy for me. Like when I watch him with the Wranglers here, he is just so confident with the puck. He's so poised. He's very creative. He's a great playmaker, good quarterback on the power play. Last season, when they called up Connor Zary and Martin Pospisil, had Jeremy Poirier not been hurt, he would have been called up with them, and it wouldn't have surprised me if he would have stuck with the team for the rest of the season. And because of that injury, it derailed that whole season. And I think it's kind of hurt him at the start of his AHL season here. But from what I've been watching of him, like he looks like a guy to me that should get a shot in the NHL. And if, like I said, if they want to boost a little bit of offense, maybe you sit a Joel Hanley or you sit a Jake Bean and maybe just give Jeremy Poirier a shot just to see what he's got. Because like Brustevich isn't ready. And nobody else really in the Wranglers is that kind of offensive defenseman. It's kind of Poirier or bust. So I wouldn't mind seeing a guy like Jeremy Poirier get a shot with the Flames here at some point. And maybe he could play with Mackenzie Weegar, or he could play him on the third pair and maybe kind of quarterback the second power play unit. Just something. Like just try something, because like we've been saying, it's just not really working right now.
Fair point by you. I didn't bring up Poirier because, one, I almost forgot he was on the team. I'm not going to lie. Like, just podcast brain at the moment. At the same time, I don't know how well his defensive game translates to the NHL. And so does that give you pause as well? In the AHL, he's been dynamic, like you've mentioned, and he has come a long way with all that kind of stuff. So I do wonder if it's worth giving him a shot, but then that's going to have people bring to the conversation Tyson Barrie. Well, we already have Tyson Barrie here. Why not give him a shot? But when Tyson Barrie was playing, he wasn't providing a ton of offense for the Flames, even on the power play that people claim he's really good at doing. So maybe Poirier is the answer to giving someone a shot here. I just don't think there's a lot coming from the back end of the Flames, and I don't think we're going to see a whole lot more coming from the back end of the Flames. So it is on the forwards we talked about, and maybe some line juggling to get this going. It's hard to win in today's NHL trying to keep teams to 2 or less goals every single night, and it's not fair to your goaltenders to ask them to do that every single night as well. So providing offense for the Flames here is going to be a challenge for Ryan Huska, but he's got to try something. He's got to do something, then roll out the same top 9 in the same order, and fourth line Kuzmenko just obviously just doesn't cut it. We saw the good and the bad of Kuzmenko versus the Predators. Put them in a place to succeed here and see what you got going here. Before we talk about goaltenders, Robert, that I mentioned there, is there anything else you want to add to this conversation about the offense, getting this Flames team going, pushing forward here?
No, I don't think so. It's just the overall message is like you just got to do something different. Just try new things. Like I said, try an AHL call up, try new lines, try to get Kuzmenko going, because I know Kuzmenko's been awful this year. Like, trust me, like I've been one of the guys who's been like the most critical of him. He's been awful this year, but he still has that potential to be that dynamic offensive player. Like, it's there. Like, we can all see it. We saw bursts of it on Saturday against the Predators before taking those ridiculous penalties.
Yep.
Like, it's there. So like, just the Flames, they got to do something different, because number one, they're going to start losing a lot more games than they win. Also, you're going to start to lose your fan base a little bit. Like, people aren't going to be as engaged with this team if they continue to score 3 or less goals every single night, and they keep trotting out guys like, Pelche in the top 9, Pospisil in the top 9, Rooney, Dewar. Like, just people are going to start to lose interest in this team because it's not working.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. Right there with you. Speaking of interest, there was a big conversation on a lot of sports radio last week, or in the Flames area anyways, of the goaltender usage, using Vladar versus using Dustin Wolf. And Pat Steinberg on the Fan 960 said something that really intrigued my interest, and a conversation that he had on his show about, yes, we want to see Dustin Wolf and we want to see him more and more and more and more, but it's still valuable to start Dan Vladar. And that starting Dan Vladar on one game, even though Dustin Wolf won the previous game, is not an indictment on the way Dustin Wolf played or anything like that. It's just allowing and realizing that the development of Dustin Wolf requires some rest as well as playing time. So I wanted to ask you about your thoughts on the usage of these goaltenders, about based on the amount of starts Dan Vladar's getting and when Dustin Wolf's starting. And because when people tweet out that Dan Vladar is getting the start for the Flames, social media, the vitriol on that app is outrageous. The outcry of people of crying that Dan Vladar is getting a start. Where do you lie in giving these guys starts? And obviously, it's all about developing of Dustin Wolf.
Listen, I think what they've done up to this point of the season makes sense with their splits, because Dustin Wolf, he is young. He's a 22, 23-year-old rookie goaltender. I think it's smart what they've done up to this point of the season. Like, I mean, you take a look at it, particularly early on in the season, not so much lately, but I would say in the first month or two of the season, the Flames really were making an effort to give Dan Vladar more difficult starts. You can't deny that.
Yep.
And I think that actually made a lot of sense. I think that's been big for Dustin Wolf being able to kind of get his confidence and get his footing in the NHL. So, and like when I see like the outcry on social media, whenever Dan Vladar gets a start, the way I view it is like the other night when Wolf didn't get the start against Utah, that made sense. He was coming off only allowing 1 goal against the Vancouver Canucks. He has the best save percentage on home ice in the NHL. He has, I think, 10 or 11 wins on home ice. So to not give him that next start really made no sense to me. So in that particular case, I can understand why Flames fans were upset about it. But overall, I think it's been working really well. But I think now we're at the point where Dustin Wolf has established himself as the better goaltender of the two. And it's time for him to start getting a bulk of the starts. And I'm not talking starting 9 out of every 10 games. I'm talking about like 3 out of every 5 starts, 2 out of every 3. Start to give this guy a little more runway. Start to let him prove that this is his team and that he is the best goalie on this team. Because once again, the Flames, they want to make the playoffs. We want them to make the playoffs because we don't want them to finish just outside and be in that mushy middle and lose their draft pick. And I think the best way for this team to win hockey games right now is by playing Dustin Wolf in the bulk of the starts, like I said. So I don't think Calgary Flames fans, I don't think they want Wolf to start every game. Like, whenever I hear media members say that, they kind of like talk down about Flames fans, like, oh, they want Dustin Wolf to start all 82 games. That's a load of crap. Of course they don't. But I think what Flames fans want is for Wolf to be the number one guy. They want him to become the established number one guy. And the other day against Utah, he should have been starting in net, and people had every right to be upset about it. But that's kind of the way I see it. Like Vladar, He's a backup goalie. He is what he is. Dustin Wolf's ceiling is significantly higher than his. He's a better goalie than Dan Vladar is. So let's start to see him a little bit more. Do you kind of see it the same way? Or do you think they should kind of continue this tandem?
I like that line of thinking, and I'm going to take it to a little bit of a different direction as well, though. I think it's time for the Flames to start challenging Dustin Wolf. And what I mean by that is the rotation has absolutely worked, and the rotation should continue, but just with some minor tweaks to how they're doing it. So my thing last week is you had Utah, a team directly behind you in the standings coming into Calgary, and then you had a Nashville Predators team, yet excuse the results, that's way down the standings from you. They're not in the picture right now for you. Why not give Dustin Wolf the quote-unquote on paper the tougher of those two starts? Start to challenge this guy. The Flames are going down south, and they're going to play Los Angeles and Anaheim, and I think it should be Dustin Wolf in net in LA, the tougher of the two matchups. Start to challenge this guy to take the next step in his development, because that's what this is all about for me. You still need Dan Vladar to start for this team. You still need Dan Vladar to give you quality starts and to win hockey games if you want to make the playoffs. But you also need Dustin Wolf to show you that all this faith you're putting into him is going to be paid off, because he has thus far. Everything you've thrown at him, for the most part, he has flown right through it with flying colors, showing you that he can be the guy. So let's start to challenge this guy. So I wasn't upset that Dan Vladar got a start last week against Utah. I just thought that maybe he should have been the guy to start against the Predators and give Dustin Wolf the harder start. Let's see what this guy can do, what this guy's capable of. So you have 2 games versus LA and Anaheim coming up this week. I think Dustin Wolf should play both games against the Kings and let Dan Vladar have the quote-unquote easier matchup versus the Ducks. That's just how I'm looking at things now. Challenge Dustin Wolf. Let's raise this level up. Let's see what this guy can do, because I think that's what fans want to see. They want to see Dustin Wolf progress and take over that number one job and be the guy for this team. We saw the early outcry of this year, people calling him Kiprusoff 2.0. That's what fans want to see. They want to see if this actually is Kiprusoff 2.0 with Dustin Wolf in net here. Let's go with this guy. So that's what I look at it for. I don't know if you like my line of thinking there, but I think it's time to challenge Dustin Wolf.
Well, at some point you got to take the training wheels off and you got to stop protecting him.
Yeah.
And you got to start seeing if he can truly be up for those challenges. And, I do think eventually they're going to have to start to give him more difficult starts, like you mentioned. I don't know if I'd want to do it like this soon. Like, I still like the idea of Vladar taking the second of back-to-backs or playing in kind of difficult road environments. I like that, but I'd say, like, for me, probably post-trade deadline, I think that's when you really start to give Wolf some difficult starts and let him kind of get ready for next season or potentially the playoffs if this team makes it. Who knows if that's going to happen. That's kind of when I would start to do it, but I think you and I are in agreement here. It's time for Dustin Wolf to show that he's the number one guy, and the way you do that is by giving him some more difficult starts, giving him more difficult starts on the road. Mm-hmm. Playing 2 games in 3 nights or 2 games in 4 nights, like that's the kind of stuff that the guys like Connor Hellebuck do in the NHL, and that's kind of what you want Dustin Wolf to become one day.
And you need Dustin Wolf to figure out the road, right? Like, this guy has sparkling numbers at the Saddle Dome, absolutely incredible numbers. You need to have him start figuring out the road a little bit as well, too. And I think giving him some harder starts might help him figure some things out here for him and allow him to gain more confidence in his game. He's got to start figuring things out on the road and feed this guy the starts. Let him develop here, because that's what this is all about. I'm excited for what Dustin Wolf brings. I like your idea after the deadline, just playing the pants off this guy. You mentioned playoff team, and the big scuttle on social media for me right now that I see a lot is Flame fans are again bemoaning the mushy middle. How scared are you, Robert, that this is exactly where we're headed? 9th spot, that 16th overall pick again, that the Flames don't even get to draft this year because that draft pick will go across to Montreal. How frightened should we be about the mushy middle and about losing that draft pick? Or should the mindset change a little bit here for Flames fans and be like, let's get the playoffs. Let's be a playoff team. If we're going to be there, let's make it here, because that's that mushy middle, man. That's the conversation right now on social media.
Well, and it's fair too. It's totally fair to have
Yep.
that conversation because it literally is the worst place to be in the NHL. But the interesting thing about the Flames right now is I'm just taking a look at the standings. They're only 4 or 5 points away from being in the top 10 of the draft. And they're like 1 point away from being in a playoff spot. So that margin between getting the top 10 pick and making the playoffs is very small right now. And man, I predicted it earlier this season that I really thought this is exactly where they were going to be. I think they're going to be battling for that last wild card spot. I think they're going to be in the mushy middle pretty much the whole season, unless Craig Conroy decides that he's going to end up trading a couple veteran players. That's the only way the Calgary Flames get out of the mushy middle is if they end up trading a Rasmus Anderson, they end up trading a Nazem Kadri, a Blake Coleman, those types of players. Like that would take a serious hit in their playoff chances and probably get them in the bottom 10. But like the playoff conversation is interesting because I mean, you take a look at the standings. There's 7 teams that are firmly entrenched in the playoffs in the Western Conference. There's one spot available. It's the last wild card, and Calgary's going to be battling with Vancouver, who's a mess right now. But if they can get their shit together, they're a really good hockey team. So you got to compete with them. You got St. Louis, you got Utah. I mean, those are some decent hockey clubs right there, especially Vancouver. And the worst thing that could happen is them missing the playoffs and losing that draft pick, and that's exactly where they're going. And fans have every right to be pissed off about that possibility. It sucks. I don't even know what more to say about it, to be honest, John. It's just it sucks. There's no other way to put it. And if they don't start scoring more goals here, I really do think that they are going to take a hit in the standings. They can't continue to score 3 or less goals and expect to be, battling for that first wild card. If they do start scoring more, they'll be right in the mix. If they don't, I really could see them falling off and finishing in the bottom 10. And I mean, how do you put it into words with just what's happening with this team right now?
You led me right to my point there. I think Flame fans should have the proper level of concern right now because just missing the playoffs and then giving away that draft pick does not help you in a rebuild, a retool, or any of that kind of fashion. And obviously, when you miss the playoffs, you're not a playoff team. So not making the playoffs also sucks. I think naturally, though, with what you just said there, the Flames not being able to score, there might be a regression coming for, and don't hate me on social media, people, a regression for Dustin Wolf and Dan Vladar with your goaltending a little bit here. How long can you continually try to do what you're doing at home on Saddledome ice and then not do much on the road like we've been seeing the last little while here? I think a few things are trending in the wrong way for the Flames, that they might just naturally fall below St. Louis and below Seattle and below some of these teams that are chasing them, just by the sheer fact that they're not. This is not sustainable hockey for a full 82, and they've gotten away with it the last month or so here by winning some games they probably shouldn't have won. And you saw it against the Predators on Saturday. When you cannot play your game and dictate how you want to play the game, you get run out of the building. And they were okay against the Predators, in my opinion, on Saturday, but they weren't the team that led the chase. They chased it. They didn't dictate that gameplay. Everything was on the outside, and when they play like that, this team doesn't get the result. So I think naturally the Flames are going to fall out of this playoff race. The question for me is, can they fall low enough that they don't lose that draft pick then? Because the second worst thing than being in the mushy middle is finishing that 11th and giving the 11th overall pick to Montreal. I think that's a worse situation than giving them the 16th or 17th pick because you just missed the playoffs. Injuries, they've been very fortunate injury-wise with Anthony Mantha aside. The Flames have been very fortunate when it comes to injuries. So that might derail them a little bit further, and a trade Conroy might make. Maybe he does give up on Rasmus Sanderson and trade him away. I guess give up's the wrong way. Maybe he does get an offer for Rasmus Sanderson that forces his hand a little bit. Maybe a Nazem Kadri does get moved to Toronto during the season. Somehow it gets figured out. There are a few things that can help derail it, but I think naturally the way the Flames are playing, it doesn't help them make the playoffs unless other teams like. The reason the Flames are only a point behind Vancouver is because Vancouver's been faltering so much drama around Vancouver, so much this and that going on in Vancouver, injuries with Vancouver, they've fallen back to the pack here. Vancouver should be a playoff team with that roster and what they have. They have Demko back, and they have all that goal scoring. They have one of the best defensemen in the league on that back end. So they're lucky that other teams are faltering, keeping them in this race. But for me, I think naturally the Flames fall back a little bit. Even though they're right there, I don't know if they actually are right there, if that makes any sense here. So for me, I think it's all natural in how it's going to be trending for this Flames team.
Yeah, and like you made a really good point there. This season, like a lot has gone right for the Flames, and heading into the second half of the season, I don't know if everything is going to go right. Like you said, like I don't think the goaltending is going to hold up quite at the same level it has. I could see Dustin Wolf just taking a step back, just because he is young. He is a rookie. It's his first season in the NHL. He's obviously very talented. He's the goalie of the future here, but to expect him to keep up the level of play that he's had in his rookie year over an 82 game schedule, that's asking a lot. Like, and I know we're talking about he should be playing more, and he should, but I don't know if the expectation for Flames fans should be this guy is like a 915 and a 2.5 goals against average type of goalie, like for this season, because he is so young and he is inexperienced. So I could see the goaltending taking a bit of a step back. The other prediction I kind of have for the second half of the season, and be curious to get your thoughts on this.
Yeah.
I don't see Jonathan Huberdeau scoring at the same rate he is right now. I know if you listen to the media in Calgary, you'd think that Jonathan Huberdeau is having a 115-point season again. I mean, you listen to the Sportsnet broadcast, they're making it sound like this guy should be like a Selke nominee
Yeah.
and that he's going to score 100 points and 50 goals this year. It's crazy the way they're talking about him. Yes, he's had a good month of December. It was great to see him be over a point per game, but he's shooting at like a 25% clip right now. It's completely unsustainable. My guess is that he takes a step back in the goal scoring department in the second half. And where are you going to find those goals? That's where you're going to need Connor Zary to bury some more chances. It's where you're going to need Yegor Sharangovich to turn into an NHL player, not a guy that's just doing cardio out there. It's where you're going to need Andrei Kuzmenko to score 10, 15 goals in the second half of the season. Are those things going to happen?
Yeah.
You know, I don't know. So I'm kind of right there with you. In the second half of the season here, I do see the Flames taking a step back. And man, like if Vancouver can get their stuff together, like we said, watch out, because no one's touching the top 7 teams in the West. I mean, those teams are firmly in playoff positions. And if Vancouver can live up to their potential, they're going to be right in that group too. And getting that last wild card spot is going to be almost impossible for this Flames team. So I don't see a great second half coming for the Flames, and I do see the Canucks kind of running away with that spot.
Other teams are going to figure it out, right? These games in the second half, they get tougher. You saw Colorado figure it out, and now they're just climbing the charts. You saw the Oilers, they figured it out. They're climbing up the charts. You saw St. Louis get off to a good start, and now they're being consistent hockey team. So you got a lot of teams figuring things out and are pressing forward here. You've got to be able to match that. And if you're not scoring goals, then you're not going to be able to match that. And where are those goals going to come from? We talked about that earlier in the show here. I do believe I'm with you on the Jonathan Huberdeau thing. I love what I saw from Huberdeau over December. Don't get me wrong, but where are the assists? Where's the passing from Huberdeau? He's not getting those kind of points. So when his goal scoring dries up a little bit, and 25% is a ridiculous shooting percentage, when he naturally regresses back to his 11 or 12% shooting percentage, that's half. Like that's half of his shooting percentage gone. Where's that going to come from? And I just don't know if the Flames have enough to be able to withstand all of those different X factors to keep them in this playoff chase. It's been fun to watch it more times than it has been this year, and having the Flames in the playoff race is exciting for a lot of Flame fans, but I just don't know if it's sustainable, and that's just going to fall off for the Flames here as well. A little bit of a fun topic here before we do a little bit of ranting on Team Canada. I don't know if you have anything prepared for that, but I definitely do. You had a fun article come out in Flames Nation earlier on Monday, which I read and I liked. The conversation was on social media all weekend. Elliot Friedman's been throwing logs on the fire of trading for Pettersson out of Vancouver, and that conversation leaked over to Flames on Twitter and on social media, and there was big debates on should the Flames trade for Pettersson and bring him in. Is he a guy that fits what the Flames are trying to do with Ryan Huskadad. And then we saw the report from a certain person on Twitter that the Flames had made contact. Where are you at with Pettersson? Is he a trade target for the Flames? Should he be a trade target for the Flames? Does he fit with Calgary? Where are you at in that conversation with Mr. Pettersson?
So as part of my job at Nation Network, I run the social media for the Canucks Army. So I clip like all the highlights for them. So I've literally watched I think I've missed one Canucks game over the last 2 years. So I've watched every game Elias Pettersson has played in. So I have a pretty good understanding of what he's all about. Number one, I don't think he's going to get traded. I think the Canucks would be insane to do so, because if you're going to move one of Miller or Pettersson, I think it makes sense to move the 31, 32-year-old in Miller instead of the 26-year-old in Pettersson. So I don't know if he'd actually be available unless you knock their socks off with an offer, which the Flames could. But say hypothetically he is available. This is just my opinion. I don't think Pettersson is the guy you want to spend a ton of assets on, mainly because of his inconsistent play. When he's on his game, like I wrote in that article, the range of outcomes in his game has to be the widest gap in the NHL, because when he's on his game, I kid you not, he's a top 5 center, top 7 center in the NHL. Like, he's that good. Prior to signing his contract last season, I believe he was on pace for about 105 points. He was 5th in the NHL in scoring. After he signed that deal, his game has just completely fallen off a cliff. He looks nowhere near the elite player he once was. So if for the Flames having to trade, like that trade would probably have to be like Connor Zary, Rasmus Anderson, a first-round pick, and a prospect. Like, that's a ton to give up. And that's a lot to give up for a guy who's extremely inconsistent and who has a contract where he makes $11.6 million for the next 7 years. So if you bring him to Calgary and he doesn't work, all of a sudden you have $22.2 million tied up in Huberdeau and Pettersson. That's terrifying. Like, that's really, really scary proposition. And just like kind of knowing the Calgary fan base, like I think it's fair to say Flames fans, they love guys who are like they're like good personalities that work really hard on the ice, that are gritty, tough, physical. Like they love their elite players to be like Matthew Tkachuk and Jarome Iginla and like Mark Giordano. Mm-hmm. They love those types of players. Pettersson is not that guy. Like, he's a pretty soft player. He loses board battles. He's not super electric or dynamic. He's more of like a cerebral, sort of quiet player that's just, pretty much smarter than everybody on the ice and has really good hands. I don't know how fans would appreciate him. And like in the media, like he hates doing media. He's not a very personable guy. I could just see, like, if things don't go well for a guy like Pettersson in Calgary, I could see the fan base turning on him very quickly. And I think it would get really ugly really quickly. So overall, like, I think it's a really interesting idea, but I think overall I would not be interested in Pettersson. I would not give up those assets to bring him in. I know a lot of people on Flames Twitter would, but just from watching, like I said, every game in the last 2 years of his, I don't think that's the guy you want to bank your entire franchise on. And that's a career defining move for Craig Conroy. And if it doesn't work, he's screwed. He's just completely screwed this Flames organization. So that's kind of my big rant on the whole situation. Like, where's your read on it? Is Pettersson a guy you think the Flames should have interest in if they do end up moving him?
I quote-tweeted the guy who put out a mock trade for Pettersson, and it was very similar to the trade you just said here on the podcast. It was Anderson, Zary, a first, and they had a prospect listed, but I don't remember the name they put there. And I said I would quickly go to the hanging up the phone option. And people in my mentions were, well, why? This is an elite number one guy. This is what the Flames need. This is exactly what you need in a rebuild. Well, he's 26 to start, and that contract is massive, and then he's a great hockey player, but he is so passive. Is that really the guy that you want to center your retool, your rebuild around? Is this a guy that's going to drive your team? And for me, the answer is no. All due respect to the player that he is, a guy like a JT Miller is the guy that drives that Canucks team a little bit more, in my opinion, from my viewings of that team. Quinny Hughes drives that team more. Pettersson is Amelia. That's the wrong name. Pettersson is the kind of guy that you put on your roster to supplement your drivers, right? He is a guy that rides shotgun to help your big guy be an X factor. I didn't love Pettersson in the playoffs last year.
He was awful in the playoffs.
I was trying to be nice to the guy. And since you mentioned, since he signed that contract, and I'm not saying that he's going to be like that, but he has gone the Jonathan Huberdeau route since signing that contract. It's his game has gone missing, and you don't notice him at times when watching the Vancouver Canucks. If you're trading for a guy and you're sending 4 large, high-end assets back to Vancouver, you better hope that you're getting a no-doubt number 1 elite center that's going to lead your team for a decade, much like the Ginla Nieuwendyk trade. High stuff, you want high stuff back. You need to make sure that you're getting a guy that's going to be around and drive your team, lead your team. And that's just not Pettersson. All due respect to the guy, because when he's on, like you mentioned, when he's on, he's phenomenal to watch. Great hands, shifty, can create, can score, and is an absolute threat on the ice there. But when he's off his game, which he seems to be a lot of nowadays, he's a liability out there, and he's just not helping his team. And so for me, it's a quick no, because for those 4 assets, the Anderson, Zari, first and a prospect package, you could go find yourself a better player, a player that more fits what you're trying to do here in Calgary. And you got to have a player that fits what you're trying to, how you want to play in Calgary. I don't see Pettersson coming in here and being a two-way center that can help drive a line. We already have Kuzmenko that doesn't do that. We have Huberdeau that really doesn't do that. We got guys here that already do what Pettersson would be doing. You need somebody else that's going to help drive this team, somebody to take a burden off of Nazem Kadri a little bit down the middle. That's the kind of player that I make the move for. So it's a nice conversation, and on paper, it looks cool to have a Pettersson down the middle. Just for me, he doesn't fit what the Flames are trying to do. It doesn't fit a rebuild, and he's just not a guy that I would build my hockey team around. That's just my opinion on the matter.
Another thing to add, too, is Pettersson's going to be 27 next season in November. So you're bidding on essentially a 27-year-old. I think that's a little old for where the Flames are in their contention window here. Like we've talked about it a lot. Like I think we both think that the Flames are at least, like at the very best case scenario, they're 3 years away from being a contender. All of a sudden, 3 years from now, Pettersson's being 29, 30 years old, right when your contention window opens. It's like you'd rather have that center be 23 or 24 when the contention window's open, not 30. So I don't think the timing of it makes sense. I don't think the player makes a ton of sense unless you know 100% you're getting the 100-point guy.
Yeah,
then 100% you do the deal. Like I remember last season, the beginning of last year and the year prior, like people in the Vancouver market were like comparing him to Pavel Datsyuk in terms of the high-end offensive ability and the defensive side of the puck. Like there was like some talk that he should get Selke votes. So if you're getting that player, 100% you give up that package to get him. Sure. Problem is, you have no effing clue who you're going to get. Are you going to, like, it could be like another Huberdeau situation. So I think it's way too risky. The contract's way too big. And like, I have it in my article here. Since February 16th last season, if you include playoffs, he's only put up 51 points in 74 games. 51 points in 74 games. The guy makes $11.6 million for the next 7 years. That's like, that drop-off is Huberdeau-esque. And you don't want 2 of those guys on your team. Like that will literally destroy this franchise for the next 7 years. I think it's too big a risk, and I certainly would not be interested in it if I was Craig Conroy. But I do think it is a fascinating discussion. It's kind of why I put the name out there, because I think it'd be fun to talk about.
Also, in that trade, if you're trading away Connor Zary, you put a lot of work in on that Connor Zary guy. And then when you go to that contention window like we're talking about, what are you looking for? You're looking for a Connor Zary type center, a center that can play both ends of the ice, can produce, can win faceoffs, can be a pest to play against. That's what you want. So you're just going to trade him away on a hope that you can get that 100-point Pettersson. I don't like trading hope for hopes and prayers. The Flames have done that too much in the past, and it doesn't pay off. Roman Horak.
That's a name I haven't thought about in a while.
Yeah, came up with that one while preparing for the podcast because you have to have something out there. Because I I don't like trading away young centers. Pettersson isn't really all that young anymore, nor is he the right-handed shot the Flames have been rumored to be looking for. So I move past that if I'm here. Anything else on the Flames that you want to bring up on the show here, Robert, before we talk a little bit about the World Juniors and Team Canada?
No, I want to hear you rant about Team Canada. I'm looking forward to this.
Okay. Well, we all know Team Canada 2 years in a row now have been eliminated by the Czech Republic, Czechia. Congratulations to them on their back-to-back bronze medals. That's an up-and-coming hockey nation, and I think we need to give a little bit more respect to how they're producing hockey players over there because they have some really elite talent coming out of that country. So this is not a disposé on how better we should be than Czechia, because all due respect to that country and what they have earned here, and they've produced some really good hockey players. I'm a big fan of a lot of these guys that have been coming out of that country. But the World Juniors is supposed to be a tournament for these young kids, and so we have to put the respect that these are kids. But my rant isn't about these kids, because the kids that were chosen, that's not, I don't want to say their fault, but that wasn't their choice. They went to camp, they were selected, they were put on a team, they were put out there to play hockey games. The mismanagement that we saw of this group of players for me is absolutely mind-blowing. It's mind-blowing at this from the top all the way down, from the beginning, from the first selection camp, when you're leaving these high-end scores at home, trying to build a team to defeat the United States by trying to handpick guys to fit specific roles for a specific game at a specific time. It doesn't work. It just doesn't work. We saw it last year. We saw it again this year. What we saw this year is the Americans going into the World Junior Championships with their best. We saw the Swedes come over with their best. And what happened to their best? Their best went out and played. Their skilled players adapted. Skill will travel and skill will adapt in these situations. So the selection process for these countries were, who are our best 24 guys? That's who we're taking to this tournament, and that's who we're going to play. Hey, you're normally a top-end scorer on your team in the USHL. Well, this tournament, we need you to be a fourth-line checker. He did the job. Sweden, hey, you've scored 20-odd goals for us, but we need you to be the checker on this. Does the job. And they provide the offense at the same time. You take over your best 6 defensemen. Hey, normally you're on power play 1. We need you to not run a power play this tournament. We got other guys that are going to do that for us. And they did the job, and they got the job done. And we saw the success of Sweden. We saw the success of Finland. We saw the success of the United States by just taking the skilled players, the best available players, and letting those players do what they do best, and that's play hockey. Hockey Canada tried to super brain this, and they fumbled the bag so bad that you left your top scorers at home. You tried to handpick guys to defeat one country in one specific game, and obviously it backfired. Always bet on skill. And then when that skill fails, you know that you took your best and you tried your hardest and it just wasn't enough. You can live with that. You can live with your skill not getting the job done because you know it was there and the effort was there. What you cannot live with, and what I'm not going to live with, is not taking your skilled guys, not taking your best, all due respect to the players that were selected, of course, and then making excuses when it doesn't work. The tired excuse. We didn't practice because we were tired. That's just an excuse. And all due respect to Peter Anholt, he's a general manager of the local team that I cheer for here. The excuses of that's not how this really works when selecting players. That's not what we really... Excuse after excuse after excuse for failing to do what you do. Canada doesn't need to win every single year at this tournament and win all the gold medals. What Canada needs to do is take their best players, put it out there, and tell these other countries to come beat us. The U.S. did it last year. The U.S. did it this year, and this year it paid off for them. They brought their best guys, and they said, match us. And Canada just didn't do that. And so for me, you failed a lot of people, including the kids you selected. You failed the prospects that you didn't take. You failed the country, the fans of that sport. And you failed the other countries trying to match Canada and the United States in their development. I honestly believe you failed those people as well, because you showed them that it was good enough not to take your best. You showed them that they don't matter enough, that we don't need our best to beat you. the disrespect that Hockey Canada did to this tournament this year around for me is absolutely evident. I don't think Dave Cameron should be anywhere near a bench, let alone a Team Canada bench. The way that he coached this tournament and the excuses that he used, just not fair to the kids taken. It's not fair to the program, not fair to the tournament, and it's just excuse after excuse after excuse. Well, the excuse is, Dave Cameron, you sucked. You didn't do your job, and it affected the players, and it affected the process. And Peter Anholt, I love you to death for what you did for the Leopard Hurricanes, but you sucked in this tournament, and Hockey Canada failed the parents, the players, the fans, and the tournament by their process on this. It's not the fact that Canada lost the quarterfinals. That's going to happen every once in a while. It's how they got there for me, and it was a complete and utter failure from the top down. Those kids played their heart out. The ones that were taken, they played hard. They were undisciplined for sure, but then that goes to the lack of coaching and accountability on that end of things. So for me, complete failure from the top from Team Canada, and just disrespect of players that were taken and not taken because there were guys sitting at home that could have helped this Team Canada win and be successful, and it could have been a much happier tournament. Just failed all the way around for me, and shame on Hockey Canada. And frankly, this is an organization trying to rebuild their image after all of these scandals that we've been having from Team Canada, from different tournaments, especially World Junior tournaments. And this is how you go out and build the team, and then you take zero responsibility. Absolute shame from Team Canada. It's embarrassing, to be honest.
Well said. Very well said. There's not a whole heck of a lot to add to that. I mean, I love the World Juniors. It's some of my favorite hockey every single year. Just the kids, they go so hard. Like, you watch NHL games, it looks like these NHL guys are going 70, 80% most nights. The World Juniors, these kids go 100% every game, and it's so much fun to watch. And now it's been 2 years in a row of just really, really disappointing hockey. Just no creativity, not a lot of skill, not a lot of goal scoring. And I think the biggest disappointment for me is the lack of physicality. Like, in the past, when you'd watch Team Canada, they would run you through the boards. They would run you out of the rink. They would physically impose themselves on every single team in that tournament. Like, it would be intimidating to play Team Canada because of how physical and how fast and tenacious they were. And over the last few years here, we've seen that go away. And I think that's really disappointing. So, between the selection, the coaching, and then I would put some of the blame on the players too, because the selection of the team, like, the team wasn't bad enough to lose in the quarterfinals to the Czechs. They had enough talent. They had enough good players to win that game and at least get into the top four and compete for a medal. So there's some of the blame has to go on the players a little bit too, but
sure,
man, it's just such a disappointing tournament from all aspects. And to see the Hockey Canada brass not take accountability, starts with Dave Cameron, was gross. It's like, in life, if you make a mistake, be a man, step up, be mature, and own it. Own that you made that mistake. Come to the conclusion that, hey, you know what? We have to be better. What would just happen during this tournament here wasn't good enough. But you have Dave Cameron coming out here saying he wouldn't change anything and the guy's retired. He's making all these bullshit excuses. It was pathetic. And then the next day you have the management team come out and say they wouldn't do anything different. It's asinine. It's insane. And they got so much backlash that Scott Salmon had to come out yesterday and do another press conference and say the complete opposite of what they said the day before. Like, the whole thing was utterly pathetic. Really too bad, because I love that tournament, but this is going to be a tournament that I'm going to look back on and just completely forget. Actually, the last two World Juniors, I'm going to look back on and really have no fond memories of whatsoever, unfortunately. But man, the team is looking like it's going to be stacked next season if they end up actually bringing all the best players this time.
Yeah, that's what we said about this year's tournament too, right? We said this year's tournament, look at the guys we could take, right? And then people are blaming not having Vladar or Celebrini. I'm like, we have enough guys, man. We have enough guys to win this tournament. The guys they left off this team could probably beat the team they actually took. That's how deep Team Canada is and should be. And when you don't take those guys and you don't have your best, and then you just make excuses after excuse, it's an absolute failure to me. And you feel for it. And then you feel for the guys left off this team as well, right? Like, I could have done that. I could have sat on the bench and done nothing and then not practicing. And it's just one big giant mess. And I know Team Canada came out and had another press conference, but I'm like, you're just contradicting yourself now. You're just going in circles now. What it needs to happen is it needs to stop. You need to rebuild your image, and it starts by doing the simple things the right way. As simple as, putting on a good tournament in front of your fans on home soil. They did this on home soil of all places too, right? Like that's just baffling to me. Start from the beginning, Team Hockey Canada. It's an absolute shame. The World Juniors is a hell of a tournament. I'll remember these last 2 years for one thing, besides Team Canada, watching some really good American teams. And the way the Finnish battled this year and the way the Swedes battled the last couple seasons. And, of course, Czechia. The way those four nations brought their best players and battled their tails off, they earned what they got in both of those tournaments. And I'll remember that part of the tournament because I like watching skill, and I like watching skill be successful. I like watching greatness. So congratulations, Team Canada, for failing, and then congratulations to Team USA and Team Finland and Team Czechia. You guys earned your medals, and good showing. We'll see you guys next year at that tournament for sure.
It's at least we don't choke every year like Sweden does. That is one I do not understand. They have one gold medal in 44 years of the tournament. For a nation with that much skill and that many good hockey players, it's insane that they only have one gold medal. Like it's like they should have been in the gold medal game this year. Like they're so talented. It's crazy that they only have one gold medal. It's just wild.
The difference is, Robert, between them and us, they did it with their skill. They went down with the ship with their skill. That's forever gonna bother me. Robert, let the people know where they can find you at on social media. Encourage them to go read that Pettersson article you have out, and what else is coming out for you on flamesnation.ca.
Yeah, I've been putting out some articles lately. Did a series kind of defining stories of 2025 for the Calgary Flames, and talked about Rasmus Andersson, the development of prospects, and just kind of like what's the overall plan. So that's all at Flames Nation, as well as the Pettersson article, and I'll have a few others coming out here over the next couple of weeks. So be on the lookout for that.
You can find Robert at Ring of Fire CGY across social media. I'm Vintage Johnny on the same platforms, Red Mile Rundown, wherever. For the love and support across all of our podcast platforms, we encourage you all still to give us that 5-star rating and review. We appreciate the downloads here, and enjoy the games this week. The nice California road trip, Anaheim and LA back-to-back Tuesday, Wednesday. It's going to be a fun one to watch and see how those teams stack up. Tell them